Hey everybody, welcome back to a part 2 to my review. I want to see if this game really lives up to the legacy of Arkham City. After playing the game, beating it, doing all the side missions and all that, I want to kind of discuss and go over Easter eggs and review certain bits of the story and some other things, nitpicks and problems that I had with it and all that jazz. So if you haven't already, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, all that jazz. And also, I will leave a link in the description to the thumbnail artist. Big shout out to them, and a big thank you. So check out them, and let's get on with the review. Story. Both games have a different style of storytelling that are equally amazing. Like I discussed in part 1, personally, both games have a different style of storytelling. While Arkham City focuses on the mystery and intrigue of a master plan and figuring out just what the hell is going on, Marvel's Spider-Man takes a different approach in its storytelling. Kind of like Marvel's Spider-Man 1, it builds up its villain and slowly has the story collide and fall around them. So like Marvel Spider-Man 1, the identity of Venom and who is it going to be is obvious for some, but for others it's going to take some time and it's a slow burn. And focusing on the symbiote storyline was a massive, amazing part of it. Focusing on the darkness and revenge and a small bit of wrath, but it's mostly on grief and dealing with illness and trying to make the world a better place in unique ways, and a ton of other things, with a lot of Easter eggs from multiple comics runs and a lot of cool, funny moments. With Venom being a mix of the comics, the original run with Todd McFarlane, the Ultimate Comics, King in Black, multiple movies, and a ton of others. Venom is like a perfect collage of all those elements in the best possible way, with other villains like the Lizard and Kraven sometimes stealing the show. Personally, the game does a lot of things justice in the best possible way. With the Black Suit storyline is something that's difficult, but you have to get it just right or somewhat perfect. And I think Insomniac nails it. While the first game focused on Otto and a mentor-mentee relationship and almost like a father figure, Harry being Venom and also being like a brother to Peter, and not just that, but being friends, works best for this storyline. I know that there's going to be some that prefer Eddie Brock, and that's all well and good, but to be honest, for this Venom to work, it had to be Harry, and it made the most sense. Personally, Harry being Venom was actually better than Eddie Brock. Yeah, I said it, and I really don't regret it, because it's not really wrong. Personally, with the storyline and how it unfolds, it takes cues from The Amazing Spider-Man and other different runs in the comics, and also leaves room for more for Marvel Spider-Man 3, which I will get into that near the end of this, but yeah. And gameplay-wise, what do they change? Well, fundamentally, they do take away the gadget wheel, which personally was something I personally prefer. As an Arkham fan, I played around with gadget wheels and quickfire, so if they could have found a sweet spot of doing a bit of mixture of both, where you could have quick-fire gadgets and a weapon wheel at the same time, I personally would have preferred it. But that's just me. And it's a minor nitpick, but otherwise, combat can feel a little bit heavy at times, but it also very much flexible, and it's amazing. It takes the fundamentals from Marvel Spider-Man 1 and Miles Morales and mixes things up in the best possible way. What a sequel should do. Now, There are some problems I have with the combat, with some of the web-grabbing moves that fundamentally change some elements, sometimes being difficult to pull off. The parry system was one that I personally did not completely care for. Yeah, I said it, I'm not a big fan of it. Now, do I say it's bad? No, but I personally don't mind it being there. It's just difficult to understand and do from time to time. And sometimes I did have a problem where I wanted to web strike somebody and I accidentally holded the triangle button and it accidentally put me into a web glide, which happened more than once. And I personally thought it was a little bit of annoyance, but it didn't happen too often to where it became a problem. But didn't change the fact that I personally didn't like that, but hey, that's just me. Miles and Peter's gameplay are a little bit different from one another. I did like the fact that Peter recycled Otto's tech and made it into his own, giving him more of a superior Spider-Man feel, but taking out the Otto in his head element, which I don't mind that storyline, and I think it was pretty cool. And mixing that with the MCU was a pretty cool idea for how they did Peter's gameplay. But at times, yes, he does, and he can feel underpowered compared to Miles. But the thing with Peter being the Gadget Man and not having the extra abilities kind of makes a little sense why he feels a little bit underpowered, and it kind of works, because when he does have the symbiote, he feels OP as hell. And I think that's the best part of things. I will say one downside to the Iron Arms is that sometimes I feel like they could have added a few extra moves with them, but it's a major or small nitpick, I should say, but that's just more me. I do think maybe Peter could have had a few extra things to diversify him, where he plays a little differently with the symbiote, but that's neither here nor there. Personally, I do feel that combat does feel more of the same, and that is a good thing, but I personally don't mind a bit of innovation, and I think there should have been just a little bit more. Now, comparing Spider-Man 2 to Arkham City did a lot of innovating, taking the fundamentals of what they had and just doubling down in the best possible way. For instance, if you were to go and play Arkham City's combat after playing Asylum, you can see the fundamental change. And then going to Arkham Knight, you can see more of a bigger change. And it shows. With Marvel's Spider-Man 2, it's somewhat there, but not enough in a certain extent. Now, am I saying that's bad? No. But am I saying they could have done a little extra in some regards? Yeah. And saying this, I don't want to piss off anybody and make it seem like I hate the game. Far from it. I'm just saying, as a fan of the original and Miles Morales, both, I've played both, and also just really enjoyed them as a gaming franchise, I personally think that there is a chance they could have done a little extra with a few things. Now, instead of just taking some ideas that, the fans wanted in the original and just adding them in just for clarity's sake, I personally think they really need to innovate for the next one. And I'll get in that discussion near the end of the video. But personally, if you go and play Arkham Asylum and then you go to Arkham City, you can see the fundamental change to everything, even strategies with fighting enemies. With this game, there's really not a whole lot of different things or strategies. Like with the hunters, yeah, you can parry, and the symbiotes are a completely different type of enemy to deal with. but there's really not many other enemy types. Yes, you have the different animal robots, but really that's it. If you go back and play Marvel's Spider-Man 1, yes, you have a enemy problem, but at least sometimes you had different strategies to take certain ones out. And with the amount of gadgets you had multiple stylish ways to deal with things. For instance, with shield enemies, you could slide under them, but you could also take their shields away, or you could basically slide under them and kick them in the air, web them, then drag them back down, or slide under them, instead of kicking them, use a different type of web gadget and knock them to a wall before they could turn around. And with the stun enemies and all that, that's where this game, I feel, has a bit of a dilemma in the combat department. With the fundamental change to not having a gadget wheel, it feels like half the time when you're using quickfire gadgets, it does feel like you're just spamming gadgets just to basically take out as many enemies as you possibly can, which some of the time, that is kind of what I did. And with the changes to the focus bar, which I personally did not care for, which I'll get into in a minute, I personally think that, honestly, some of the combat elements really needed more time in the oven. Now, do I think that all the elements are bad? No, but I do think that they needed some work. Because if you really think about it, if you go back and play Marvel Spider-Man 1 or Miles Morales, think about, for instance, the amount of different enemies. Yes, sometimes that they were a bit samey, but think about it for just a second. Miles Morales, you had different types of tech enemies. Ones with gauntlets, ones with whip swords, and ones with hammers. For Christ's sake, you could even do finishers on the big enemies. In this game, you can't even do that. You can't even do finishers on the bosses. The triangle circle on the bosses is gone, which was a major annoyance to me because it was kind of took out the stylish element. The only time you get that is the Mysterio fight, which, let's be honest, he's basically a regular enemy type, but floating in the air. Which I kind of found a little bit frustrating because taking out those extra finishers on bosses kind of takes out the fundamental fun of things. Like, the amount of times that I would do a finisher on Fisk or the other bosses in the original game, or just in general for Miles Morales, it was actually pretty fun. The amount of times I did that was 1,000, but it was fun to do. But taking those elements out kind of dulls down the experience for me. Now, this is me, and it's just a minor nitpick. I personally thought it was kind of annoying. I thought that it kind of took out a fun element that really forces you to kind of build up that focus bar, with the way they changed the focus bar being my biggest annoyance. Personally, I do understand why some of these changes were implemented to make the game harder. Doesn't change how annoying they are, and I wish they weren't changed, but that's just a personal bias of mine. So, basically, you cannot heal unless you have a full focus bar, which in the previous two games, I do believe you could heal whenever. If you had a somewhat full focus bar, a full focus bar, or a half full, or just minimal amount of focus, just a small amount to heal. And it can be kind of annoying because you really... I'll just say it's just kind of annoying. I don't have any other word for it. Some of these changes. For instance, removing the villain bio and getting rid of a lot of the gadgets from the first game. Personally, the removal of suit powers was a fine change. It was kind of set in stone in Miles Morales, but in this game it's completely gone, which makes the most sense, and I'm kind of okay with that. But there was a few gadgets that I personally think they should have kept, or at least pulled something from Devil May Cry 3 where you could swap out gadgets. Personally, I don't think that feature would be not that bad, because some of the gadgets from the OG game were pretty good, and it would make kind of sense to use them, because some of them were crowd control and some of them for stealth, so, but yeah. Another thing that I really got annoyed by was them removing the villain bios. I don't know why this was removed. It was in both games. It kind of annoyed me that it was gone. Because you could actually read up on villains and stuff. There was another thing, a small nitpick I do have. I do feel like they could have added what Miles had, but do it for Peter as well. I don't count the flame side mission completely. Like, it kind of counts, but I think there should have been double for each character. I think there should have been like maybe a Hydro Man style mission that kind of would do what the Black Cat DLC kind of did, but for Peter this time with, MJ. It would be something that I find interesting, and maybe another mission for Miles that's like Mysterio, but like a different villain. I think that would have been pretty cool. But combat is pretty cool. It's not clunky at all. There's a lot of different mechanics to it. You can still bash the crap out of enemies and pretty much destroy them. But I think there's the story is amazing. It can be kind of like expected, kind of like how the first game was, but the first game kind of pivoted it in a few points, but it's still good all around. They're both equal. Compared to Arkham City, I don't know. I'm kind of torn. I'll kind of give it a tie on the story front. Because, even Arkham City has some flaws in this storytelling, but it's still good all around. The map is amazing. In general, I think Marvel's Spider-Man 2 kind of is in a tie right now when it comes to Arkham City. As an Arkham fan, I really don't want to sit there and say that it's completely over it. I kind of consider it a tie at the moment. For just a lot of different reasons, and it's still a great game. It's still amazing. It just, some elements still needed work and all that jazz. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoy.